Hello there. So, Amber from Genshin Impact. She's pretty mid. Everyone agrees on this, right? Amber isn't useful, and while you are correct, Amber isn't useful for stuff like Spiral Abyss or Stygian Onslaught, she is actually pretty useful early game. And I discovered this because I recently started a new account, and I'm planning on dropping more videos in the future about like stuff like Inazuma and other stuff like Dragonspire and stuff like that. But Amber is the first character that really stood out to me as a starter character. I think she's way better than both Kaia, the Traveler, and Lisa all combined. Like, no, there's some discussion because she does have a shield and she isn't really a starter character. You do need to pull on her banner, but I think Amber is unironically the GOAT out of all the starter characters. First of all, I want to go over her build, because if you're talking about Amber, you probably want to know what kind of build I'm running her on. So, for a starter build on Amber, and honestly a late game build as well, I'd run her on the Favonius bow, because it lets you like generate more particles. And it's actually pretty easy to generate particles with stuff like charge shots, which allows you to just land a crit on enemies with a weak point. So that's already something she's going for. She can generate crits pretty easily even with a low crit stat. Now, other than that, I'd run her on a 4-piece instructor set, because that gives the entire party 120 elements and mastery, which is a really big buff, especially this early in the game. And then you can run her on like either an on-piece or an off-piece circlet, which has crit rate to help with the Favonius bow procs, if you don't land the headshot on the opponents, right? So that's what I'd do for a build on Amber. But what does she bring to the table? Well, in my humble opinion, Amber brings very little to the table, but of course, she has charge shots, which can stagger enemies like Ruin Guards, which are like kind of like the mini bosses in the early game. They're also good against the wind thingamajigs that like fly up in the sky. You need some sort of like range attack to get those down. Other than that, she helps with the Stormfire boss, Storm Terror boss. You can like shoot arrows at him. Like, it doesn't really do all that much damage, but you can do it. And her skill, Baron Bunny, is actually somewhat useful. I've like felt here in the early game. Like, of course, it is very janky, but when the enemies do lock onto it, it does a decent amount of damage if they get hit by it. But even if they don't, the fact that they are distracted means that you can get behind enemies that are, for example, have shields. Even in Leeway where they're rock shields, you can just get behind them while they're distracted by Baron Bunny. So that's really, really nice. And of course, her pyro element also helps with stuff like wooden shields, which are rampant throughout Mondstadt and also like kind of Leeway. So like, she has a lot of different combat utility, and that's like the first point I wanted to make. Like, Amber unironically is pretty good in combat, at least early on. Well, other than combat, what does Amber bring to the table? Well, in my opinion, she brings the most out of any starter character. Now, first of all, there are a lot of puzzles in Mondstadt and Leeway that require... Well, they don't require a fire archer, but they do require a fire character of some sort. And while Amber is probably the best for doing this, you can use other pyro characters, but it's not nearly as good, and Amber is a lot more efficient, and she's a lot easier to use. Like, take a puzzle like this, for example, right? Like, you could run around with like a pyro catalyst user and do each of these things, or you could stand in the middle of everything and just shoot the different torches with Amber's like charge attack instead. And that's a lot more easy and it's a lot more simple. So Amber brings that. There are a lot of pyro puzzles in the early game. Other than that, there are also those Anemo Slimes puzzles where like they fly around and you need a bow character. Amber helps with that as well. In Sumeru, she can help with stuff like the Dendro puzzles, where like you infuse yourself with Dendro and then you shoot something with a charge check. Like, of course, your other characters can do that as well, but bow characters are just better at doing that than other characters. She's also really useful for Dragonspire exploration because she's pyro, and again, she has pyro on her charge attack, which is really, really useful for Dragonspire. Again, like the torches around everywhere, really, really useful. And of course, torches aren't just in Dragonspire, they're in other places as well, where they might be used for stuff like puzzles. And Amber is good at that as well. And you might think, okay, cool, well that's like Mondstadt primarily, right? Well, no, because she's actually also really good for Leeway. Now, why is that? Well, there are a lot of these pressure plates in Leeway that require you to have like at least 2 different characters, basically, right? And while Amber is only one character, her Baron Bunny does count as another character. So you can use Baron Bunny as well as Amber to like charge these different plates up, and that's really nice. Of course, you can use Geo Traveler as well, but if you have Anemo Geo or Anemo Traveler, which is in my opinion probably the better choice early on, Amber can like work as a replacement there as well. So Amber is also extremely useful for early game exploration, and honestly, in some places like Dragonspline, pretty much mandatory. So she brings so much more to the table than her peers do with like Anemo Traveler and Lisa and Kaia. And while those are good for like, I don't know, like ice bridging and lighting up different elements and monuments, they just bring so much less than Amber does to the table. And like, in addition to that, Amber's like talents are also really good for exploration. Like, of course, we have every arrow finds the target, the iconic talent. This is her first decision talent and increases the crit rate of fiery rain, which is her ultimate, by 10%, and widens the AoE by 30. This is really nice for Favonia's Warbow, because of course extra AoE is always nice, but then the 10% crit rate as well means that she gets both crit rate from her circlet and from, you know, this talent. And all of the different arrow procs will mean that you always get a Favonia's proc with her ultimate, basically. Other than that, we have a second talent, which this works on weak points, which I mentioned earlier, are pretty prevalent in the early game. So if you do get her up to that ascension, you can still use her for that. But again, I think Amber kind of falls off at this point because her damages are so low. But she is very useful otherwise. And her passive talent is completely goated. Decreases stamina consumption by 30% with like gliding, which is just really, really nice. And like other characters like Kaya has a talent that's pretty similar, of course, where he decreases sprinting stamina by 20%, which is honestly pretty much probably better, right? But the gliding stamina reduction is also really nice in Amber, just an additional bonus. So that's really nice. Other than that, her constellations actually make her function somewhat if you want to put her as DPS. The first one is body triggered, which basically lets you like detonate your Baron Bunny and deal 200% extra damage, which is really, really nice, but like again, it's not enough. And then this Constellation 4 decreases its cooldown by 20% and gives an additional charge, but again, it's just not enough. And Wildfire, it gives movement speed and attack buff, which like attack buff is actually nice and makes Amber like a decent buffer. Not great by any means, but like it means that you can actually bring more to the table. But like, of course, Amber was never built for combat like this. She was built as an early game character, and she really, really thrives in being an early game character, in my humble opinion. So like, yeah, that's just my opinion. Like, Amber is unironically kind of goated, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that as they've gotten further along in the game, because she falls off somewhat quickly. Like, again, I dropped my Amber around level 50 on this account, right? I felt like it wasn't worth leveling her anymore, but I still bring her out every once in a while to do some sorts of puzzles, even though I have a Nicole that is always on my team because she's like my best built character. So let me just do a quick flex real quickly. First of all, completely free to play, level 80. I can't ascend her yet, but god, I'm not looking forward to finding these things here. Weapons, yes, we have the signature one, which can be ascended, but again, it requires level 50. I'm not level 50 yet. Artifacts, look at these artifacts. Oh my god, oh my god. Where do we start? We start with the flower. Ooh, attack, ER, and attack. Don't look at the defense rolls. Ooh, this one, attack and crit rate. And EM, really nice. Attack, ER, nice. Attack, ER, nice. And a lot of EM and crit rate. And don't look at the defense rolls. And then we have crit rate and crit damage. So like my Nicole is pretty good, I think. Like 34 over 95. And again, she's meant as a support unit, but I'm currently using her as an on-fielder because I don't have a proper, like, you know, on-fielder. Maybe I should use Amber for that. Let me know down in the comments below. And with all of that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you're willing to give Amber not exactly a second chance, but at least like look upon her in a more positive light, because she is unironically very, very good early game. What the heck is this? Like, what the? Hello, sir. Can you tell me what the hell's going on? Yeah. What is this place? Genuinely? I mean, sure, but like, damn, it's dark. Yeah, you are pretty relaxed, eh? Like, this doesn't make any fucking sense, gang. Okay. About Toma, I don't really care about Toma, but like, I guess, huh. Whack. Very organic call to action. Remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Thank you very much for watching the video.